just hope it normalizes the conversation about medical aid in dying, so we can just have the conversation like we're saying, what are you having for dinner? And that it'll be legal around the United States, like it just passed in the United Kingdom a couple of weeks ago, where everyone now can use it there. It's not something you have to do, it's a choice. Only 1% of the deaths in each state where it's legal use medical aid in dying. The people that live in states where it's legal and choose medical aid in dying and get the medication, only there's 30% of the people don't end up using the medication because there's enough relief in knowing they have an out if they need it, so they don't end up using it. So it's just an option. It's a choice. With any choice in your life, why do you want that regulated?
Hello, my friends. It's your host, Lisa Keefauver here. Welcome back to another episode of Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. Now, just in case you're new to the show, this is a podcast all about grief. We explore the expansiveness and the pervasiveness of grief in our lives, and boy, are we feeling it now more than ever. But what I've learned over my 20 plus years as a social worker and the more than a decade I've spent now as a widow is that if we lean in, hold space, bear witness for one another in the most difficult seasons of our lives, that's where healing lies. Now, today's guest, after having a varied career as a dancer, a visual artist, advertiser, and entrepreneur, she's switched gears. It's Serene Meshel-Dillman, and she found her way to commercial production and, well, it stuck. She worked her way up until she became a producer. And then she conceived and directed her first documentary film, Getting to the Nutcracker, a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to produce the classic ballet from auditions to final performance. In 2014, her second documentary, The Fifth Dementia, is about a Los Angeles-based band whose members live with Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. They're able to sing and play music despite their neurodegenerative diseases. But our conversation in today's episode features her latest work. It's her first ever series, Take Me Out, Feet First, currently streaming on Amazon Prime. The series is deeply moving and explores the journeys of 25 terminally ill individuals and their families as they navigate end-of-life decisions, including medical aid in dying, otherwise known as MAID. It highlights the importance of autonomy and compassion in these difficult situations. Today, we explore her personal experiences of loss, the cultural context of grief, and the importance of discussing MAID. Our conversation also highlights the need for agency and dignity in end-of-life choices, emphasizing the significance of sharing stories to normalize these discussions and advocate for change in legislation surrounding MAID. Hello, listeners. I'm so thrilled to welcome Serene to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Well, listeners heard at the top of the show a little bit about your background in film and producing, and of course, about your incredible series, your documentary series, Take Me Out, Feet First. And we're going to spend some time exploring, of course, your personal connection to that and what you've learned as a producer and as an interviewer on the series and the reception that you've received as you were sharing. It's being featured in, all kinds of amazing places across the country and around the world. But I wanted to ground our conversations where I ground every conversation over the last 6 seasons. And that's inviting you to share an early memory of loss, thinking about where or how do we learn the grief beliefs that we hold in our lives? For many of us, they are formed in our early childhood by the ways adults explicitly or implicitly respond to loss. And I always like for each of us to learn to understand where they came from so that if we hold some grief beliefs that aren't serving us, we can be aware of that and set them down. And so I wonder, when you think back to your early childhood or young adulthood, is there an early memory of loss? And what do you remember about the familial response?
Yeah, there's only 2. My great grandmother, which was my father's grandmother, he was extremely close with her. And I remember we used to go visit her in a nursing home every weekend. And when she passed away, my father was very upset, but we, as kids, I had two brothers, didn't really participate in any of that grief. We didn't go to the funeral.
Okay.
We didn't have a family discussion about it. It was just, she's gone. And then I was very close with my mother's mother, who used to always take care of us when my parents would go on vacation. And when she passed away, I remember going outside of my house in New Jersey and thinking, my God, the world is continuing. My
Yeah.
grandmother just died and the world's continuing like nothing happened.
Yeah. How old
And
were you then, ish?
okay, she was born in 1900. She died when she was 92. So
Yeah.
92, I was like 30. I
Yeah.
just remember thinking the world keeps going and, don't they know that my grandmother just died? And
Yeah.
I think that was more personal. We didn't really discuss it. I knew my mom's relationship with her wasn't great. I knew um, that my relationship with her was very different from anybody else's in my family's relationship
Mhm.
in so many ways. And I felt it was very personal. It wasn't something that my family discussed.
Yeah.
So I don't think we ever really talked about death too much.
Yeah. Or grief. And to your, the not discussed too much is such a common answer, as you can imagine, that I've had from guests over the years. And what I always say about grief beliefs is we hold them whether or not we've ever used the word grief or death. In fact, if we've grown up and experienced losses in our lives and haven't talked about it, that's the belief we gained, which is one doesn't talk about grief or death. We don't show emotions, etc. And so I just invite us all to do that, not, as I say often, a lesson to go back and bash our parents and, oh, what a bad job they did, but just to
I
highlight the
also,
cultural context of, like, how would they know any different if that's how they grew
also,
up?
I think I have three children. If somebody obviously close to them
Yeah.
did die, but if they had been much younger, I might
Yes.
have protected them from it.
Yeah. It's
Might have
always the
bec-
age appropriateness of it
right,
too, right?
right, right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think culturally we're shifting a little bit about what we understand. I've had pediatric palliative social workers and other folks on the show sort of thinking about, of course, the developmental, but I do think we've moved in a direction. Time will tell whether we think that's, useful or not, but about being a little less sugarcoating because kids
Mhm.
notice. But I wonder, when you think back to that first loss when you were younger and you were witnessing your dad being upset, but sort of nobody talked about it and you weren't invited to the funeral. Do you look
Mhm.
back? It's sort of course, memory is a constructed thing, but do you look back at that version of yourself and remember you wanted to go, you didn't understand why you couldn't
No,
participate?
because I didn't have that relationship with her, and
Yeah.
so to force that on a kid, I mean, I'm of two minds. One of the women in season 2 that we're cutting right now, her name was Eileen. She's from Santa Cruz, and one of her memories, which I put in her episode, is that as a 7-year-old, her uncle dropped dead at one of their family reunions, and all the kids were ushered upstairs,
Yeah.
and there was no discussion. There was no what happened to Uncle Frank. It was all, you know, we'll take care of this. You guys go play. And so I don't think that's very conducive to teaching a child how to navigate
Right.
the waters of grief. But on the other hand, I don't know that you want to. I mean, my kids had very visceral reactions to any conversation about death when they were young. My son at age 5 started talking to me about death. And I was like, we don't need to talk about this, like this is where'd this come from? And he wanted to talk about it, what happened afterwards. And I'm an atheist and my husband's an atheist and we don't believe that there's anything afterwards. And I said that
Yeah.
I think there's nothing afterwards. And he was upset for days,
Yeah.
like crying. And my husband's like, why'd you tell him that? So
Parenting is just a long series of things that we feel guilty over, right? Yeah. Yeah.
and then when my daughter was started asking about death around the same age. My son was much older then because they're 10 years apart. And he said to her, you'll become a fairy and you'll still be around and we'll all, be with each
In
other. And that
relationship
made
with
her,
you.
and she was so placated by that and was so happy by that till she was 16 years old. She kept saying, I know that, this is not the end and there's something afterwards. And I talked to my oldest years after he did that, when we're all talking about that he did that, and he said, well, I was so devastated when you told me there was nothing after her. I had to make that up for her because I didn't want her to feel the same way. So they dealt with it. I didn't, like they dealt with it in a way to make themselves feel better, and
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really beautiful, and also speaks to sort of the shifting mores of the time and different generations and what speaks to each of us. So I appreciate you laying that all bare and just helping us maybe see. I think many people listening probably saw themselves in the various stories that you just shared, the like being swept into the other room when something bad happened, or to not being invited to the funeral, etc. And again, it's just the context I like, as I hope I am a part of a movement included with you of making the conversations around death and dying and grief more accessible, more relatable, more, then we got to start unpacking what worked for us, what didn't, what did we learn, what beliefs do we hold that help us, and what beliefs do we hold that actually might be getting in the way of having meaningful conversations or even just feeling like we're having a meaningful life. So I appreciate you joining in the canon of answering that question. I want to pivot to, I know you've done some other, this is not your first production or even documentary series, I don't think, but I want to make sure we spend as much time today unpacking Take Me Out Feet First, which is really a series exploring medical aid in dying, starting with the very first episode, which, spoiler, not spoiler alert to the listeners, there is the journey of both of your parents choosing that. But can we rewind to why this topic for you? Was it the very personal calling that was happening? Tell me how you came to
Well,
this
I don't know.
topic.
I hopefully you can edit this, because I don't know how much time you want to
Yeah. No, you're good.
spend
We've
on
got
me
an hour
explaining
to
this.
spend together. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I did a documentary, just a film before the series called The Fifth Dementia, which was a band about here in LA, with players that were Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia patients. And the name of their band was The Fifth Dementia. And it was how the basic premise is that the music brought them out of their neurodegenerative diseases, so that they were able to sing and play for an hour and a half twice a week, when before they showed up or when they left, they were sort of nonverbal or even couldn't get up. Some people got up and danced. Anyway, it's the power of music. And one of the couples that I highlighted were Miriam and Michael Meyer. He was the violinist, she was his wife. And we became very close. And Miriam was his wife, Michael's wife, and Miriam is coincidentally my mother's name. So when my mom decided to use medical aid in dying, this was probably not too far after I finished that one, probably like a year or two after. And I had told Miriam, we had kept in touch, and I had told her about my mom, also named Miriam. And she said, well, compassionate, she was a big proponent of Compassionate Choices, which is a nationwide organization here in the United States that tries to get legislation in all the states where it's not legal passed. I think they're trying to go into 19 states this year. Pretty huge. So she said, Compassionate Choices is having a webinar. You might want to log on just to listen.
Yeah.
So I did. And the woman leading it was the pharmacist that gave my mom her medicine when she used medical aid in dying. So I was frantically texting her, like, while she was leading this webinar of thousands of people. I was like, it's me, it's Serene. Like, I can't believe the coincidence. And she wrote back, and she, totally remembered my mother, because my mom was like such a force. And so we became friendly. And then coincidentally, she was with my dad 5 years later when my dad did it. So when my mom decided to do it, I always have a camera in my hand. It's just the way I've always been. I was a still photographer for a long time. And then whenever I did commercial production, I always had behind the scenes stuff I shot. So anyway, I had my camera, went up to see my mom and say goodbye, and I shot it.
Okay.
And I put it away for 2-3 years, and I didn't sort of do anything with it. And then, Compassionate Choice, COVID hit, Compassionate Choices said, we have these storytellers in each state that are trying to be advocates for medical aid in dying. Do you want to talk to them? So, I mean, I went through 700 people of their
Wow.
storytellers online, and I think there are about 50 that I really thought were interesting stories, and I Compassionate Choices put me in touch with them. I Zoomed with them, and then I narrowed it down to about 25. And then my husband and I started traveling around interviewing those 25 people. And it was just supposed to be my mom, basically.
Yeah.
And then when I met all these people, their stories are so compelling. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and they're all so different, and they're in a different state, and they have different diseases, and they're different characters. And so it just turned into this thing where it became a series. I had no plans to make it a series.
Well, that's how those things happen, right? That we feel we are drawn to or called to do that work. And I wonder if one of the places that it might be helpful to start in the beginning for those who are listening who maybe don't know medical aid in dying, or maybe have, as I can imagine, many people do, some misconceptions, right, about what it is and isn't and when it's used. Would you mind kind of giving us a little primer so that we understand
Sure.
what?
Medical aid in dying is not assisted suicide. It is not with another doctor or anybody helping you. You must do it yourself. You must
Yeah.
qualify for it by having a 6-month terminal diagnosis. It cannot be neurodegenerative. You have to be of sound mind and body. You have to have 2 doctors sign off on it. It used to be 2 weeks apart. Now it's 2 days apart in California. Still 2 weeks in some other states. I think it's 2 days in New Mexico. I'm not sure all the specific details state to state, but in California, where I am, was 2 weeks when my mom used it. It became 2 days when my dad did it. The protocol for the medicine is different all the time. With my mom, it's no longer, I think it was Seconal, 90 tablets of Seconal, and we had to empty them and mix them with apple juice, and she had to drink it in 2 minutes. Now it's comes pre-mixed in a jar. You mix it with whatever you want, you drink it down, and there's not one incidence of misuse. There's not one incidence of abuse. It's not possible because you're doing it yourself. And, it's enough to kill an elephant. So you can't be in a vegetative state or in a coma or anything. And I mean, there's zero evidence of it ever being misused. The slippery slope argument is that nobody wants grandma around anymore and they want her money. So they're going to have it. That's not possible.
Right.
Not legally possible. There's enough guardrails up that there's zero evidence of any abuse or misuse. And I don't think entertaining any other side is even necessary.
No, I don't either. But I just wanted to lay that out because folks come to listen to this show from around the country, around the world, actually. And not everybody is maybe as versed like you might not have been prior to your own experience with medical aid and dying. So I like to set that context. And, you start off this series, as you were just alluding to, with your mom and your dad, Miriam and Robert, I think was your dad, stories. And as I was saying to you off air, I felt, that you shared a little bit in the story of how they met and fell in love and was at University of Vermont, which is where I got my master's in social work. So
it's also where I went to undergrad.
And where you went to undergrad. So go Catamounts. Anyway, but the story there, I think, was so beautiful. And one of the many things that I found so compelling about the story, and as I was saying, by the way, when you watch it all, which you absolutely should, do get the tissue box out for sure, is the way you involved the whole family, your brothers, the conversations that you had, not just that you were filming it, because many of us may not be filming these conversations, but kind of the conversations even with your father, because your mom passed first, was around, did he get to have an opinion? What was his opinion? What was the conversation? What do you think back now about that time, about your mom's decision-making for herself, which agency is so important, but also how she went about either informing people, asking people?
Well, she didn't ask anyone, but she was a social worker with terminally ill cancer patients for many years, and she knew what her diagnosis entailed. And when she got by the way, she had back pain for 10 months before she went and looked at it. She was so healthy. She worked out every day. She swam, she hiked, played tennis. So I think when she had this back pain, she got massage, or she went to bed early, or she changed her mattress, or, there were all these things that couldn't possibly be cancer. So when she started losing sleep, and my father made her go see a doctor. And she called me from the car and she said, I feel like I'm living in an alternative universe. I have stage 4 spindle cell sarcoma, and they've given me 3 months to live. So that's like, what? You can't even compute that, right?
No.
So she immediately is a take care of business kind of person, very
Yeah.
strong willed. And she basically took the bull by the horns and said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to, I know what this entails. I know there is no, like, even if she had opted for chemo or radiation, it maybe would have extended her life a few months, but it wasn't going to,
There was not a cure on the
there's no
horizon at
cure.
all.
No.
Yeah.
So, no, she didn't. She told her doctor what she was doing,
Yeah.
and she told us and my dad what she was doing,
Yeah.
and her friends. And I think my dad, by the way, Jewish husband, I'll do whatever you want, honey. Like he was not going to argue with her.
Yeah.
And I think even if he had, he would have been
He would have lost
clipped.
that. He would have lost that,
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
what's he gonna do? Convince her to go through chemo and radiation
And
so
be in
that
pain and
be in
yeah.
pain and be on all the meds, by the way, that they would put you on, would give you to use medical aid in dying. It's not, why not have a quality of life that's
Oh,
dignified rather than be in pain for 3 more months and
yeah.
maybe stick around? So it wasn't an option. He basically said to us, when are you free to come up? And that's when I'm going to do it.
Okay.
And that's what she did.
Yeah. Well, and I know in the context, and maybe this was more in the context of the decision making that your dad came to when he ultimately was diagnosed with cancer as well, which was your sister-in-law, if I recall, had a 5-year painful course of cancer and didn't have that option, or that wasn't a part of
Oh,
their.
she had the option.
She
She
had the
just
option.
didn't want to take it because she had 2 young kids and she wanted to stick around for as long as she could.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wonder then for you, for your, because you have 2 brothers? No,
Hmm.
they're 2 brothers. Even though it was not your decision to make and it was clearly your mom's decision, do you remember did you have side conversations with your brothers, and in particular, brother who had watched his wife? Now, you might be well versed in this topic, maybe because someone you love has utilized MAID, or perhaps you're a doctor or a social worker, chaplain who works in this space. Or perhaps this is your first time even learning about medical aid in dying. Either way, what I imagine we all have in common at one point or another is finding the language and maybe even the courage to talk openly about the things that scare us most, our loved ones dying. When we come back, Serene shares the conversations she had with her brothers about their dad's decision to use MAID. We also explore the underlying important themes about choice, about giving the patient agency, about the quality of their life, and the quality of their death. You're listening to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Keefauver. Hey friends, so I've been craving a place where we can hang out together, a place that feels more interactive, a place where we can create a meaningful community. I'd like to share more about myself, what I'm passionate about, and honestly, what I'm struggling with, the human stuff of life. I'd also like to hear what's happening in your mind and what's weighing on your heart. And I want to build an authentic, interactive community off social media. Life is happening so fast, and I want a place where we can slow down, dive in deeper, and figure out how to metabolize it all together. And I'd love to have you join me. That's why I launched my Substack called AFGO with Lisa Keefauver. Now, AFGO, if you haven't heard me talk about it in my book, From the Stage, or on my podcast, it stands for Another Fucking Growth Opportunity. Yeah, of course. I had to get in a judicious use of cussing. And rest assured, my friends, like I do in all my work, I'm going to show up authentically and offer thoughtful, meaningful, and practical guidance on how to center aliveness in a world full of loss. I look forward to your comments, our chats, creating special audio and video content for you, and so much more, whatever we can dream up together. And don't worry, if you like things delivered to your inbox without having to search the web for it, AFGO with Lisa Keefauver will be delivered directly to you. You can head to Substack and sign up at afgowithlisakeefauver.substack.com or head to my website, lisakeefauver.com, and sign up there.
Eric, that was the one who was married to Slovena, who passed away of colorectal cancer. She made it very clear to them that she wanted to stick around as long as she could. Eric, when my mom decided to do it, was totally behind it. I mean, he's a nurse.
That's right.
So he said that she knew what she was doing. You know, she says she was a smart lady. She had a degree.
Yeah.
And she saw what Slovena had lived through, and she didn't want to go through that.
Yeah.
So none of us, like my dad, had a say in this.
Yes, of course.
So we all just sort of supported her in her decision.
Yeah.
Willingly. I mean, it was sad, but that's what she wanted. And so we supported her. And that's what I would hope, if I'm in that situation, my family would do for me.
Same. Absolutely the same. And I think about, you know, the fact that it's legal and supported now. I've had a guest on my show. I'm not sure if you ever crossed paths with Laurel Braitman. She wrote a really beautiful memoir, and both of her parents have also passed, but her father, who was a doctor, chose that before it was legal. And just the different kind of experience and the kind of conversations and the kind of the quality of life and the experience was just so much different, you know, over the course of those two deaths. So really thinking about the accessibility.
That's a really salient point, because even now in the states where it's not legal, those conversations are still happening. How do I do this? You know, I have one woman. Did you watch the Trisha Erica episode?
Yeah. The metastatic.
Both of them have metastatic breast cancer. Trisha's having chemo every 3 weeks now. She's sort of towards the end right now, and she's in Michigan, and it's not legal there. So her decision, which she talked about in the episode, is to donate her body to the University of Tennessee Body Farm when it's her time. And she's not going to have the opportunity to have her family around her or to go out
on her terms,
without pain, on her terms, without pain and suffering. So she's going to rent a car, drive it to a parking lot near University of Tennessee, call them and say, I'm in a blue Toyota pickup with license plate, blah, 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 in parking lot, blah, blah, blah. Come pick up the body. I'm doing it now. That's what she has to do. And that's what she wants to do when she wants to do it. Alternatively, if she was in a state where it's legal, she'd have her family around her. They'd have a nice
ceremony or ritual.
I mean, it'd be calm. It would be loving. It would be, you know, not in a parking lot by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a dichotomy, you know, such a drastic difference in the way you're going to die. And why? Because a couple of people don't believe that somebody should have agency at the end of their life. Fuck you. Yeah. You know, it's like, it makes me so angry.
I'm right there with you. Absolutely. Well, agency, and we can talk about autonomy, you know, bodily agency.
I'm sorry.
No, you know, you get to be enraged, and especially both personally witnessing, but now you spent these, I think you said 50 conversations total, 25 conversations. So you're seeing this is not a theoretical exercise. This is a real world exercise. And for everybody listening, if you haven't had a family member or yourself come to this point, you likely will. Just because it hasn't happened to you yet doesn't mean it won't, because 100% of us, by the way, we have 100% terminal diagnosis.
Like everybody keeps trying to compare it to the abortion issue. It's not. Not everybody in this world is going to have an abortion. Everybody's going to die, right?
And every one of us is going to die. And with the increase in all of the diseases that we are facing, which I of course hope take a turn in this country, many of us are going to die, unfortunately, if we're not given this opportunity, sort of a long, difficult, painful end. And when I think about the effort and the support and this I don't quite want to use the sacredness because hospital births aren't particularly sacred, but we put so much care into bringing people into this world. I think that's what I would say. Could we do better? 100% yes. But all things being equal, we do this work to bring people into the world. And we have welcome parties and we have celebrations. And then what do we do in the end? We try to.
The good news is that there are a lot of new pathways to having
Yes.
a very nice death. There's death doulas, there's death
Yes.
cafes. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the University of Vermont is the only university in the United States offering a death doula course to get certified
That's awesome.
to be a death doula, which is so cool.
That. Yeah, no, and I've had many death doulas on my show, and I agree. I think we are definitely moving in that direction. I think I was just sort of adding on to your sort of fuck you mentality in that, like, this is something that's going to happen to all of us. And how can we, so much when I see, I work with individuals one-on-one in the wake of loss, many death loss, but other kinds of things. And so much of what people are often grappling with is the witnessing of seeing their family member suffering and not being able to do something and not feeling like their own family member had control or agency. And I think of like, it's not just the quality of the life that they get to live towards the end of their life, but it's also the aftermath of what we do to families and friends when we don't give them that sort of dignity.
I just put my 17-year-old Jack Russell down about a month and a half ago. And
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a dog.
A couple of years ago,
her name was Daniela, and Daniela was pooping and peeing on herself. And I would take her out for a walk, and she'd look at me like, I'm not walking down that hill again. Like, I can't get back up. And I would carry her up the hill so that she would only have to walk down the hill. And it got to the point where I'd open the door and she wouldn't even go out anymore. And she looked at me with these eyes, and I thought, okay, I get it. I hear you. I see you. I'm with you. I picked her up. I took her to the vet, and, I held her in my arms, and that was that. And I feel like I did a good deed that day. I mean, I feel like she was so, like, I heard her. And the sad part is that we can't do that for our family members, but they can do it for themselves. And I think that is tantamount to doing the same thing, because at least, Daniela couldn't speak to me, I mean, except with her eyes. But humans can speak, and they can say, I'm ready, and I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, Brittany Maynard started this whole movement, and I'm thinking that this is sort of the tail of that. We're following along in her footpath, trying to spread the word and make it better for everyone.
Yeah, because right now it's 10. No, how many states is it legal now in the United States?
It's legal in 10 states.
10.
And
that's what I thought. Okay.
DC.
Vermont being one of them, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. It was actually passed by the Delaware state legislature last year, but then the governor did not sign it. And so he was voted out of office because something like 76% of the Delaware population wanted it.
Yes.
So, it'll get there. It keeps getting not passed in Massachusetts, in New York. It's legal in New Jersey. But it'll happen. It'll totally happen, because there's enough groundswell now.
Yeah.
And it crosses political, it crosses age, it crosses religion lines, it crosses all the lines.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no one group that's opposed to it.
Absolutely.
So, I think it's just a matter of time.
It is a matter of time. Well, from your lips, as they say. One of the questions that I had for you, for those who haven't seen the series yet, but when you think about, because there was 6 episodes out in the first season, and you were just alluding to Trisha and Erica, but I know you interviewed a couple of really young folks. I think Andrew was 34. Dana was 26. What were some of the lessons, themes, struggles, dare I say beauty, in some of those stories that you think might be helpful to draw out in our conversation today? Or though I don't know if you want to give sneak previews to what's coming in season 2, but even if it's just from the conversations that you've had, what comes to mind when you think about that?
With Andrew, he was a huge psilocybin advocate, and he used that as well as marijuana sort of self-medicate, and it worked. It helped with his pain, it helped with his sleep, it helped with his eating, it helped with so much. So, and I know that's becoming much more in mainstream now,
Yeah.
but that was for him and his episode. That was, I think, what I got out of that. Plus, he was such an amazing guy. He was
Yeah.
a teacher for special ed kids, and his roommates were his caretakers, and he was a hockey player. I mean, he was such a dynamic character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
I
put
think
such a face. I think that was one of the many things I've already appreciating. Sorry, just to interject, is like the people who are choosing this, as you said, it's not just that they cross religious and economic and whatever, but they are your kids' special ed teacher. They are the nurse next door. They are your garbage man. They are your senator. They are your right.
Yeah.
They're us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're young, many people.
Yeah. Dana was 26. She had something sarcoma. It was in her nose. She was a tuba player and she couldn't breathe. And so, not tuba, trombone. And so she was in Finland at the time. Her mom went over there for a year and helped her with her treatment. And then that didn't work. So moved back to Minnesota. And now her parents are huge advocates with with compassionate choices for medical aid in dying in Minnesota, because Dana passed away. But the fact that she was such an advocate at a young age for this,
yes,
is huge. What 20-year-old do you know that talks about this so vehemently? And since it was not legal, it was not an option for her in Minnesota, was advocating for people that came after her.
Which is yeah, remarkable, right? Remarkable. This idea that we might know that we aren't going to be here to live for the change that we seek, and that we're going to spend our time doing it anyways, which is such a mature thing to do at any age, but especially, as you said, remarkable for somebody at that age of 20.
She was extremely active on social media.
Yeah.
Constantly posting what she was going through on her Instagram. I mean, we're still friends with her boyfriend, Luis, that he's now a stand-up comic.
Good. I hope he's bringing this material to the stage.
He's not yet. I asked him that recently, and he I think eventually will, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that that reminds me of something that we had chatted about a little bit off the air, but part of what I think your series is doing so beautifully is part of building this bigger cultural context of having these conversations, of showing these faces, of telling these stories, because that's how we continue to move the needle on helping things like policy and legislation move, because people see it as accessible and everyday. And now we're seeing medical aid in dying in our sitcoms and in our movie series, and now in your documentary series, and on social media by young people using that platform too. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's so powerful. Yeah.
And the nice thing too, having like Dana was really into music. Andrew was really into music. Mimi, she was episode 4, was really into music. So when I talked to each person about the kind of music that was moving to them, or how they wanted, because a lot of people listen to music when they're in bed, right? And when they're
taking their last breath
for treatment. So I love telling the story. Mimi was one of the first people I shot, even though she was sort of the later episodes. But Mimi had a tattoo on her hand of a blackbird. Her husband had one put on his chest. Her sisters had them on their hand. All of her kids had a blackbird tattooed somewhere on their body. I mean, it was like 15 people had blackbirds tattooed on their body in her family. And while I was talking to her, I was like, why? What's going on? She said, well, I really like Blackbird, the song.
The
and
Beatles.
When I die, I have instructed everybody at the same time, no matter where they are, to listen to Blackbird at the same time and look out their window and think of me. And I'm like, great. Now I got to get the rights to Blackbird. Like how can I not? Right.
Yes.
So after shooting her, I tried for like 8 months to get the rights to this. And I hit a wall everywhere I went. I mean, I went to the top of Sony, who owns who at the
Yes.
time owned the rights to the song. They don't anymore. And I just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know what else to do. And so if one person is that I know was married to Burt Bacharach, and her son was performing with Burt at the time at the Glastonbury Music Festival
Yes.
in
Yeah.
London, and had met Mary McCartney backstage and became friendly with her. And he's like my son's age, and I just thought, okay, I'll ask him. So I said to him, here's the story with Mimi. I got to get Blackbird. Can you ask Mary to ask her dad? Basically. And he's like, sure, I'll send her an email. And so he sends this email, and I'm like biting my
Yeah.
teeth because I've been waiting so long, and I don't hear anything, and I don't hear anything. It's like a day, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. Finally, I wrote to him, and I'm like, what? Have you not heard anything back? And he said, no, I'll email her again. So he emails her back again, and he says, did you see my email? And she's like, oh my God, it went to spam. Sorry, didn't see it. We'll send this to my dad. 24 hours later, Paul McCartney wrote back and said, it's yours. You can use it. I love this. I just love the story, and so
That's why we got to hear Blackbird.
That's right.
So beautiful.
So
First of all, thank you for your tenaciousness, but also like a reminder of here. That's just another example when I think about like when you have the time to plan, and I think about this for all kind of palliative care or hospice care or the death doula work, but even whether or not you're going to choose the medical aid and dying part at the very end. But part of what you're highlighting is like when we bring intention and agency to that time of our life, we can have the kinds of conversations to say to family members, here's how I want you to remember me, or here's the song I want you to think of when you think of me. Like we give ourselves the spaciousness to bring intention and ritual to this sacred threshold that we're all going to pass. Again, whether or not it's with this use of medical aid in dying, but that story of that is so beautiful. And also shout out to Paul McCartney for getting it.
Well, I mean, his wife Linda died of cancer.
Yes.
His second wife, I think, lost her leg to cancer. I mean, everybody's touched by it in some way. I mean, Andrew's story was so compelling he was a huge the Revivalists, the band. He's a huge fan. I wrote to them. They're like, use whatever song you want. Like everyone is just Baryshnikov, who was my mom's like love of if she could have jumped in bed with Baryshnikov, she would have been heartbeat.
She's probably not alone in that wish.
So when I wrote to him and said, she wants to watch your heartbeat performance before she dies, can I use this? And he's like, yeah, sure, of course. Like we love this concept. Everybody is behind it. I don't know anybody who's not. Like I've never, in all these years of working on this, there's not one person who said, I don't think this should be legal, or I don't agree with this, or I don't want this for myself or my family. So who is it that's blocking it? Like, I don't get it. I don't understand who's not saying, yeah, sure, we should just all have this human right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm 100% on board as well. When you think about the season 2 coming out, I just want to make sure that we sort of give a highlight to that, but also the continuing exposure of the show. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share. It's about to be featured on a major network show.
Yeah, no, you can't say anything.
No, I'm not going to say anything about that. But right, it's going to be, it's continuing to have a life. And of course, with the season 2, it's going to have its own life. I mean, I know we already know sort of the end goal, which is to make this legal and accessible everywhere. But what are you wishing for as these stories continue to come out in these different platforms, both the series itself and on these major media platforms?
I just hope it normalizes the conversation about medical aid and dying, so we can just have the conversation like we're saying, what are you having for dinner? And that it'll be legal around the United States, like it just passed in the United Kingdom a couple of weeks ago, where everyone now can use it there. It's not something you have to do. It's a choice. Only 1% of the deaths in each state where it's legal use medical aid and dying. The people that live in states where it's legal and choose medical aid and dying and get the medication, there's 30% of the people don't end up using the medication because there's enough relief in knowing they have an out if they need it. So they don't end up using it. So it's just an option. It's a choice with any choice in your life.
Yeah.
Why do you want that regulated?
Exactly. And I think often I talk so often about like just the power of agency, having agency in our own
Hmm.
lives, which gives us that dignity. And again, I think, so, of course, because my work is so often with the people in the aftermath of death, to know that your family member had the kind of agency that they deserved at the end of their lives is something I hope that we would all wish for everyone in our lives. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for creating this series. And I'm glad that I don't know how it works with creativity, but sometimes I think, just the universe just shows up at your door. Just you said you filmed your mom not knowing it was going to be a documentary series. And here you
Hmm.
are, about to embark on season 2. But for all of us who
Yeah.
get to watch these stories and the privilege of watching these stories and the work that you're doing, just really grateful. And thanks so much for spending so much time with me today on the
Of
podcast.
course. And thank you for putting it on your podcast. Just the more we talk about it, the better.
Yeah, no, this will not be the last. It's not the first and will definitely not be the last medical aid and dying conversation we're having on the
Oh,
show.
good.
So thank you
Great.
so much for your time today. I so
Of course.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. I'm so grateful to Serene, both for this conversation and for all the time and energy and care she's putting into creating her incredible series, Take Me Out Feet First, which is now playing on Amazon Prime. You've got to check it out. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I did have an incredible conversation last season with Laurel Braitman, where we explored many things, including the difference between her dad's death when MAID was not legal and her mom's death when it was. You can check out that episode wherever you're listening to this one. And to learn more about MAID and if it's legal in your state or a state near you, you can visit compassionandchoices.org. And don't forget, if you're looking for help and guidance having end of life conversations with someone you love, you can pick up an EOL deck by heading over to thedeathdeck.com, where my listeners can receive 20% off with code GSB20. Also, friends, whether you're a brand new listener to the show or you've been with me over these past 6 seasons, I'd like to first say thank you. Thanks for showing up. I'd also like to remind you that taking the time to leave a 5-star rating and write a review, well, it's not only incredibly meaningful to me, which it absolutely is, it also helps the algorithms get this show out to others who might need some grief support too. Actually, I want to share a review I received recently from Krista that really touched my heart. She said, "Thanks for holding my hand while I miss my mom. My mom died this year, and listening to your podcast has helped me deal with the many overwhelming feelings. And I also appreciate the encouragement to be kinder to myself in the process. I think of my mom every day, and sometimes I want someone to be with me on this journey. And that's when I listen and learn from you and your many generous guests. Thank you for all that you do for others. It truly helps." Actually, thank you, Krista, for taking a little time out of your day to let me know how much the show means to you. And if this show means something to you, listeners, please join Krista in leaving a rating and writing a review too. We can't leave without thanking Giles Smith of Alafia Sound for the music. Okay, my grieving friends, remember that, yes, grief is a sneaky bitch, but don't worry, I've got your back. Until next time, I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding you in my heart.